Hello, everyone, and welcome to. I've absolutely got no idea what episode this is, so sorry about that. I think we're 13 or something. I've been doing podcasts for work and trying to juggle a million plates, but thank you if you're listening. And as I try and continue to grow, both what I talk about, I found myself wanting to just pick up on something that I talk about again and again and again. And I've been involved in a couple of chats and talks, and I'm going to be talking at the Leeds Digital Festival with BGSS and a couple of other talks this year as well. And I'm constantly internally with either colleagues for the various companies that I work or work with for or advise. The subject of what makes a good digital delivery manager, and as we work through various topics from sort of understanding the subject matter to agile and how what that means for organizations, and I talk to some really varied sort of colleagues and peers and people. I'm really interested in getting really to grips with some of the nuances that I have learned and skills that I've developed and skills that I'm still developing to be the very best kind of digital delivery manager that I can be. And I've wrote a blog post, which if you are watching the video version, you'll see. But if not, go to mariosblog.co.uk and check out the post, How to Be a Good Agile Delivery Manager. And I just want to talk through some of the points that I've covered very briefly. There's a couple of posts actually. There's How to Be a Good Agile Delivery Manager, which is the one that I've just wrote. But then prior to that, there is Trying to Be a Better Delivery Manager and Constantly Learning too. So read that first and then read the How to Be a Good Delivery Manager. This came up today, just talking through with someone and just starting to realize that people, or I think that the way I got better was to start to think really more deeply from a high level about some of the client pressures and the pressures that clients go under. And if we look at a post-COVID world, and hopefully as things, if they ever do get back to normal, the types of pressures that clients will be under, trying to understand that and think about your role as a DM and the projects that you deploy as part of your organization, whether you're a contractor or whether you work on behalf of a company. And just thinking about the pressures that the clients are under and why they are running the projects that they are and why you were involved. And in this post, just in the first couple of paragraphs, I talk. Well, firstly, go and read. There's a guy that works for the Ministry of Justice, and I forgot his name even though I'm reading the article. Mark Stanley. He's got a really good account about what being a good DM is, and even though the post is from 2012, it's a really good kind of broad read. And I follow GDS as a standard pretty religiously. I'm a big believer in what they've done there, and I think and I make no bones about the fact that I think it's an excellent playbook for anyone wanting to do things to a standard. But let's just look at and think about where our clients are, right? Over the last 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, or prior to COVID, they've all been on various transformations, and we've helped them along with that. And if you're an IT consultant, you'll have probably done the same. So what have those transformation programs been? And have you looked back at those clients and really understood whether they've, in quotes, transformed? I know if I look back through some of the clients that I've worked with and helped, they've moved on-premise infrastructure and hardware to the cloud, which has often looked like just containerizing everything and emulating what they had physically, along with all the problems, and then moving it into the cloud and then just having different costs rather than reduced costs. They've just got different costs because they're paying for an orchestration layer and they're paying for new cloud roles within the organization to manage the virtual estate. And that's a subject for another time. But maybe they've become, in quotes, agile, and maybe that's worked, maybe it's not. And obviously, COVID has brought with it its own challenges in terms of what big organizations do and how they run their businesses. And whether you're involved in the public or private sector, I often, when I start a project, really think about not only just looking at the project and within the constraints of the project, but actually sitting back and researching and consuming the organization. So have a read through their kind of white papers, or if they're a public company, go and look at their shareholder meeting or AGM notes or minutes, or they'll be published somewhere on kind of quarterly earnings call and really start to get to grips with the challenges that they face, trying to put yourself into their shoes. It's really going to help with some of the things that I want to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, in terms of the things that you can do to be an even better delivery manager. There's a couple of videos that I always recommend that people read. One is a lightning talk, which kind of summarizes and parodies a little bit of the bullshit around Agile, and I really like it, and it's really good fun. And I wish that I had those kinds of on stage presentation skills, because he's really funny. Go and watch that. And then one is using an analogy, I guess, for high performing teams, but it's from a dev conference from quite a while ago, and it's called How to Crash an Airplane. And if you go to my blog post, you'll see both of those YouTube videos on there. Do watch them, they are excellent, and really do position some of the things I'm trying to get across in terms of the way you should think and some of the things you should think about when it comes to, well, what can I do better as a DM? And these are some of the things that I encourage others to think about when they come to me and ask for advice. So I'm going to go through the post and kind of cover some of the points that I've made. Obviously, it will help if you've read the post. And if you've got an opinion or comment, or you don't agree, you can get in touch by Twitter, because I'm more than happy to have a healthy debate. So I think that a good delivery manager starts to think about these external forces on a project rather than just the project itself, and really look at yourself in terms of who you are and what you're thinking about and how your approach to the project is, and focusing on maybe some of the things that we'll talk about today that are missing in your approach, and maybe you need to double down on those and develop those skills. Now, when I talk to people, I'm often rebutted in that, well, Mario, it's great because you talk from an ideal world, and maybe it's good for you because you've kind of carved your niche in what you do with the way that you are, but that won't work here. Or, well, in theory it's great, Mario, but practically it's just not feasible. The client wants it this way, and there's no kind of scope to move. Or some DMs aren't in control of everything. They're given the project in its current state, often on fire. What do? And no one's doing their job, and it's this kind of sort of pushback, I think, to do some what are often difficult things. And that list's often endless. And I really do understand that, you know, what I talk about here, you can't just apply to every project. What I'm trying to do is share my personal experience of what has made me better. So this isn't I guess, a blueprint for anyone else, but more have a think about it and see if it applies to you. I know that I've had to really develop as a human being outside of my job to be better at my job. And whilst that sounds very prophetic, it's been absolutely true. So the first thing that I did and do, and regardless of the project or who I'm working with or for, is I have a high standard of excellence personally, and I won't compromise on that ever. And setting that stall out, no matter at which point you engage with anyone, both personally and professionally, I get to set that stall out, and doing it consistently means that, you know, I'm very particular, and the way that people think of me is something that I help to craft. And yes, I make a joke on the blog post about being a bit of a diva, and nor am I suggesting that you just kick off and have a strop when you don't get your own way. And you shouldn't get in the way of moving forward, but you should develop the skill to be able to work within the constraints of your organization or your project, but at the same time maintain your personal standards and ethics in terms of what you do and the quality to which you do it, rather than get begrudged into the kind of, oh, well, everything's terrible and I'm kind of diluting what I'm doing and I'm not happy, because these things, as we'll come on to in a sec, really do impact your project team. So some hard truths now, and it's understanding the world around you. Now, I've picked up on this for years, and it's something that I've got better and better and better at. And I don't think it's something you ever complete. And I certainly look up to so many people that do this better than me. But the reality is, and I don't mean to be too kind of whimsical, but in terms of, you know, I know we live in a woke world now, and we don't want to upset anyone. But one of the cold, hard realities is that no matter how good you are at Agile, or how good you are at technology, or even project management, you have to be good with people, even with those that you don't get along with. And it's a mistake that I've made for years and years and years, and maybe one for another podcast when I've had a beer. I can tell you. In fact, if you're listening, maybe you've experienced some of my mistakes. But you have to get better. And one of the biggest impacts you can have on your project is being able to get on with people. And that's something that we all think we can do, but very often we can't do well. and, really trying to understand why are people involved in the project, what are their motivations, why they're in it, do they care, do they not, what are their drivers, what are their motives, and you really should, as a human being, learn to interact with your teams at a human being level. And it sounds really, really simple to do, but it's not. And outside of all the politics and the noise and the commercial pressures of whatever environment that you as a delivery manager are working in, I would thoroughly recommend that you really have a good hard look in the mirror and think, do I really get on with people? Can I get on with people, even those that either I don't like or don't like me? I've wrote blogs in the past about the shadows you cast as a leader, and I was talking to a colleague earlier about being emotionally consistent. So that emotional consistency, you are the environment, and how you are and operate under times of pressure or stress or duress, or when the project's not going great, as well as when everything's going well. You have to be consistent, because people look at you, even just by project title, even if you don't see yourself as a leader, they look at you as a barometer and a gauge of what to do and how to behave. And what I see is plenty of delivery managers that under pressure will behave quite base, sometimes aggressive, sometimes a bit snappy. And actually, being consistent emotionally is one of the characteristics that you can develop to be a much better leader. And we know, don't we? We've read enough books as clever people, well, what makes a good person? Honesty, openness, humility, respect, drive, fairness, inclusivity. But how many of those things do you actually practice consistently? Or think about the last time you were involved in politics, really kind of negative politics too, the politics that hurt teams. And were you commenting on a team member, or maybe you've got an opinion that was overheard and you're a bit loose with your mouth, or anything in between, or there's a different DM turns up every day dependent on the mood you're in. Really think about those things and how good you are at that, and really, really get better at it. It's certainly one of the things that I've done, because that understanding that you are the environment just as much as the facilities on site or how plush the client's office is. Google's, there's a link in the blog post. I'm going to keep saying that because I'm going to cite the blog post that I'm looking at. But Google's Aristotle project did some research and looked at, what are the characteristics of the most effective teams. And one of the things, and again, this is about you as a leader, is the amount of psychological safety that there is in the team. So, well, how do you create that atmosphere? As a DM, as a leader, you need to put your hand up and show a little bit of humility yourself. One of the things that I see is DMs not being comfortable with saying that they don't know. And I think that's a shame, because that's often indicative that they're working in an environment where they don't feel psychologically safe to do so. Maybe that's been a previous role, an existing role. They're just nervous. But the thing is, that gets in the way of the development of some of these human traits that we're talking about today. You need to stand your ground with the organization that you work for and the client too. So we talked about having these kind of ethics, these standards. And if you're not prepared to commit to them consistently, even to the point of being a little bit, not friction, but, making a point, you're not going to do that and be brave, then that dilution is going to also dilute your team and the effectiveness of your team. And you need to be clear too, clear at how you communicate, what you're saying, why, and demonstrating that you understand. And all of this, along with a bit of humility and making sure that people are praised and encouraged to ask questions and, explore and investigate. If you're not going to be open to that and you're not going to cultivate that as a team, that psychological safety or lack of creates apathy. And apathy for me in delivery teams is one of the biggest problems that I see, because it's always someone else's problem. It's always the organization's problem, the employer's problem, the client's problem, the developer to the left of me, the software tester to the right of me. This DM doesn't have a clue, or I haven't got this resource. And it's always, always someone else's problem. And that apathy, I think, is poison. And then just, again, bit of a short kind of podcast this, but finally, kind of my third point. So be more of a doer than a sayer. So even though the world's getting more complex, and, well, whether it's COVID that's made it more complex, or whether the world's a little bit cyclical in terms of trends or transformation or client needs, but I do find that those that can do practically, and I talk about this in the other blog post about, as a DM, know your technology, know the things that you're delivery managing. I'm not sure how effective you can be, really, if you don't have hands-on experience with the thing that you're project managing. Now, I know that might be a little bit contentious. Some people won't agree with that. And I understand that. But I think if you're managing a load of devs and you're responsible to oversee a DevOps pipeline, having something beyond a rudimentary understanding of DevOps, I think would really help. And I think it's your responsibility to understand that. I think if you're working on an RPA project as part of a digital transformation program, then you should understand RPA to a level of doing it yourself. And maybe you've spun up some demos with Blue Prism or some smaller RPA platforms and had a play to understand what it means and how it works. And just really taking that, and again, it's that professional pride and standard to really get involved into the nuts and bolts of the technology that typically you manage or you're expected to have oversight of. Now, these are the things that I think are really important that have helped me. This in conjunction with the previous post about some of the practical things around agile delivery and communication. Go and have a read of those. And what I'm also going to do is publish a little mural that I've done, which, as far as I'm concerned, if I walk someone through all the kind of sort of key areas of a project to look at, the minimum viable thing, right? Getting your project in order, getting your house straight, making sure that if you're delivering software, there's a decent DevOps culture and you've got the right people developing the DevOps pipeline, making sure that you've got agile in place as best as you can do, making sure that communication and culture's there. All of that I've included in a mural. I use Miro quite a lot. What a product! In a mural that I'll give away as a download on Twitter. So, in summary, if you want to be a good DM, it's more about just knowing your way around a Kanban board. You've really got to think about you as a human being and your client and the challenges that the clients go through and what they're going to go through in the next 2, 3, 5 years. Be more human. Start to think about putting yourself in a position as the client and understanding what they're going through. Be better with people. So really get to grips with, and let's be honest, there's always someone on our team that we don't get on with. Make that better. Really, really try and make that better. And then finally be more of a doer than a sayer. And even though this requires the most effort, really get a hands-on understanding of technology, build a website, write a blog, do a podcast. All of these things that I'm doing is just to, I guess, keep that hand in, right, of being immersed in the thing that I do every day because you want to be good at it. Now, I will finish on, I'm fortunate that I do something that I love and my hobby pays the bills, and for others, it's a job. But I think that next level up as a DM, you've really got to question, are you doing what you love? Thanks for listening. I still don't know what episode this is, but that has been the DM Daily. That is nowhere near daily, but thanks for listening. Get involved in the conversation on Twitter. DM_daily or my personal Twitter account at MarioDC. Go to the blog, mariosblog.co.uk. Check out this episode on YouTube too. Thanks for listening and talk to you again very, 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 very soon.